Picture this. It's 336 BC, and a young king has just inherited a rocky, mountainous realm about the size of the modern state of Maine. Fast forward barely a decade, and that exact same man is ruling a territory stretching from the shores of Greece all the way to the borders of India. It was a literal flash fire of conquest, like a meteor blazing across antiquity. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're dissecting the incredible brief rise and the spectacular bloody fall of the ancient world's largest empire. Okay, let's dive into this. The heart of this entire story really comes down to just one number, 13. It only took 13 years for Alexander to take that relatively insignificant kingdom and expand it into a true world superpower. He didn't just win a few skirmishes on the border. He completely rewrote the map of the known world in a time frame that, honestly, most modern governments take just to plan and build a highway. And the scale of what he achieved in those 13 years is absolutely staggering. At his peak, Alexander conquered 5.2 million square kilometers. That is 2 million square miles. And perhaps the most mind-bending fact of this entire campaign, he did all of this without losing a single battle. Not one. From the Mediterranean coast to the deep river valleys of India, his army was this unstoppable, undefeated juggernaut. But the contrast here is where the story gets really fascinating. 13 years to build and gone in 40. Alexander died abruptly at just 32 years old, thousands of miles from home. And almost immediately, the colossal empire he'd forged fractured and shattered. It completely collapsed before his own infant son even had the chance to grow up. Chapter 1, the Biddle. So, to understand this meteor of an empire, we actually have to step back for a second. Alexander didn't start from absolutely nothing. The foundation was laid by his father, King Philip II. Philip essentially transformed Macedonia into a terrifying military superpower. He unified Greece under his banner, and way more importantly, he built a lethal war machine. He gave his infantry the famous phalanx formation, bristling with those massive 18-foot spears, and he created the elite shock troops known as the Companion Cavalry. But then, at a family wedding, Philip was suddenly assassinated by his own bodyguard. Just like that, in a flash of a blade, the 20-year-old Alexander inherited the throne and an unstoppable army that was primed and ready for war. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because Alexander wasted zero time. In 334 BC, he crosses into Asia. By 333 BC, he clashes with the Persian king Darius III at Issus, sending Darius fleeing. But the real masterstroke was in 331 BC at Gaugamela. Here, Alexander and his 47,000 Macedonians went up against a massive Persian force of 100,000 troops. Leading the cavalry charge personally, Alexander shattered the Persian lines, and Darius fled for the final time. The climax of this Persian conquest was rapid and incredibly dramatic. Babylon literally opened its gates and surrendered without a fight. Then came Persepolis, the absolute jewel of the Persian Empire, which Alexander's forces burned to the ground, a brutal act of revenge for the burning of Athens 150 years prior. But the ultimate victory was strangely anticlimactic. When Alexander finally caught up to Darius, he found the Persian king already dead. He'd been assassinated and left in the dust by his own retreating governors. You'd think that would be enough, right? But the campaign didn't stop there. Alexander pushed his men into a brutal 3-year campaign across Central Asia, navigating the impossible mountainous terrain of Afghanistan. He secured a political marriage to a Bactrian princess named Roxana, and then pushed right into India. In 326 BC at the Hellespont River, his men faced actual war elephants. They won, but man, they were broken. Exhausted thousands of miles from home, the Macedonian army finally mutinied. They just flat out refused to take another step. So the conquest ended not in defeat, but in sheer exhaustion. Chapter 2, the unprecedented scale. And this brilliantly illustrates just how insane this expansion was compared to anything else in human history. Look at the numbers. The Roman Empire took centuries to hit its peak. Genghis Khan and the Mongols took 70 years. The British Empire took 400. Alexander did it in 13. He conquered an average of 1,100 square kilometers a day, every single day for over a decade. It was an absolutely insane, completely unsustainable speed that totally dwarfs the great empire builders of history. When you look at his life, it's just a staggering density of events. Think about this. He becomes king at 20, crosses to Asia at 21. By 28, he's deep into India. By 32, he's dead in Babylon. In that tiny, tiny window, he fought and won 4 major battles, survived the lethal Gedrosian desert where thousands died of thirst, and built over 20 cities named Alexandria. And at 32, right before he died, he was actually planning a massive naval invasion of Arabia. Chapter 3, the Vulture's Circle.
Let's drastically slow our pacing down here as we hit 323 BC. Alexander is on his deathbed in Babylon. Fading, surrounded by his generals, he allegedly whispered a final, vague command regarding his heir. He just said, "To the strongest." It wasn't a plan, it was an invitation to chaos. The vultures descended almost before the body was cold, literally carving up the map before the man was even buried. His generals, known as the Diadochi, didn't wait for his pregnant wife to give birth. Ptolemy grabbed Egypt, Seleucus took Asia, Antigonus took Anatolia, and Cassander seized Macedonia. The cracks widened immediately, and they instantly began fighting each other. What followed was 40 years of clinical, absolute brutality. These generals, men who had eaten with Alexander, bled with him, sworn fierce loyalty to him, systematically murdered every single member of his family. His mother, Olympias, his wife, Roxana, his half-brother, his sister, and tragically, his son, Alexander IV, assassinated at just 13 years old. The bloodline was completely exterminated just so these guys could secure their own power.
The wars of the Successors finally sputtered to a bloody end around 281 BC, marked by the death of the 80-year-old general Lysimachus, and with that, the vast, unified empire was officially gone. In its place were fragmented, much weaker kingdoms: Ptolemaic Egypt, Seleucid Asia, Antigonid Macedonia. Not a single one of them controlled even half of what Alexander had built. Chapter 4: Autopsy of a Collapse. So, we have to ask the core question of this entire explainer. Why exactly did this massive, undefeated juggernaut fall apart the literal second its founder stopped breathing? Well, it comes down to 3 fatal flaws. First, Alexander built no functional government administration. He was a conqueror, not a governor. Second, as we just saw, there was absolutely no succession plan. No will, no regency council, just a vague whisper. And third, there was a deadly lack of internal integration.
Take a look at how he actually tried to run things. He left local Persian satraps in place to handle the day-to-day stuff, but awkwardly layered corrupt Macedonian governors on top of them to control the military. This dual-power system was a complete disaster. It was totally unstable and ran entirely on Alexander's personal, terrifying charisma. When he died, the engine simply stopped.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the massive cultural disconnect. Alexander actually wanted to blend his empire. He adopted Persian dress, he married Persian wives, and he envisioned this incredible Greco-Persian fusion, maybe even making Babylon his permanent capital. But his own generals despised this. They didn't want a blended utopia, they wanted absolute Macedonian domination. That ideological gap violently tore the elite ranks apart from the inside.
Chapter 5: A 300-Year Legacy.
To wrap this up, we need to shift our perspective from his massive political failure to his very unexpected success as a cultural force. Because while his unified state vanished in a single generation, the culture he spread across the globe did not. Alexander birthed the Hellenistic world, this remarkable 300-year era where Greek language, art, and philosophy took deep, deep root in lands stretching from Egypt all the way to Afghanistan. Imagine walking through a city in ancient Pakistan and seeing Greek architecture and hearing Greek being spoken. He built a lasting civilization, even if he didn't build a lasting state. So the crucial point is this absolute, staggering paradox. Alexander the Great is widely considered history's most successful military commander. He literally never lost. Yet, simultaneously, he's history's most failed empire builder. He conquered everything, but the political entity he created was a ghost the very moment he was gone. Which leaves us with this really provocative question for you to reflect on. What matters more in history, speed or endurance? Would you rather have the brilliant, brief, undying glory of Alexander tearing across the map in 13 years, or the slow, enduring legacy of a builder like Rome's Augustus, taking decades to construct an empire that lasted centuries? It's a profound question of legacy. Thanks so much for exploring this amazing piece of visual history with me. Take that thought with you, and I'll see you in the next explainer.